Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all well. So let's take a moment to sort of center ourselves. Right before we begin, though, I just want to say that the photographs, that some of which I use for my prayer space and other ones that I think people would like to use is up on my webpage at www.wisdomoftheshalom.com and under the new photograph page section, and you can see them, and right below there's a link to download them at sort of the highest megabyte rating that I was able to get for each picture. And people can go to the drugstore or whatever. It's very easy to get them printed nowadays, and you can make them the size you want. And if one of them looks a little fuzzy, just reduce the size and it'll get all nice and defined. And they should look good, and I hope it blesses you all. And as I find new pictures, I will add to it. And also there's links to the YouTube channel where some of the music I use is, and it's just be that particular song. And there are websites that you can post YouTube links to download things, so you can download the music and enjoy as you wish. So I've been working on that. I hope people enjoy it. So I was putting in the finishing touches, so I'm a little speedy. So why don't we take a moment to sort of collect ourselves, let the morning sort of drain away any momentum we have, so we're just present in this beautiful morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are, and just enjoy sort of that space. I'm going to open my window because it's a fresh morning and the birds are chirping and it's still sort of sunrise-ish, so the light's very pretty. And touching in with these things are actually extremely healing. So well, now I know what to talk about for today on top of what I thought to. So we're already being graced. So wonderful. So fingertips together. That centers the mind. The fingertips are sort of the what's the bone right below the hand? This sort of knuckle is right below sort of the breasts, and fingertips together, and the angle of the hands are sort of pointed slightly more towards the face than straight away from the body, to a posture that feels comfortable, and the fingers are slightly spaced, and it's just the fingertips touching. It really calms the mind, it aligns the body, it connects the left and right hemispheres of the body and the mind, which causes the mind to relax, and you're able to focus, puts the energy into the central channel, which is the Kundalini channel, and permits the flow better to the top of the head, which sort of activates the wisdom centers in the head and above. So there we are. Does a lot of things. So you breathe, close your eyes. Breathe into the nostrils, feel the air. Is it fresh? Is it a little stuffy? If it is, open a window, because stuffiness does not really bring clarity to the mind or calm. But slightly fresh provides a certain, for lack of a better word, subtle shock to the body, which kind of aligns everything. So, all right, so take a breathe and just relax. That's the only technique right now. So just breathe. It could be through the mouth or nose. But eventually, after maybe a couple deeper breaths, you want to switch to the nose. And as you line up, the breaths become lighter and more subtle. Sort of more refined. So let's take a moment. So as you find that space, it's nice, relaxed. You can feel the energy just sort of drain away. And once it's still, the energy has to go somewhere, that momentum. By putting the fingertips together, really sort of balances and anchors the energies of the body. So the energies kind of have to radiate out without sort of radiating within us and our minds, which perpetuates the speediness. So it sort of drains away. Mine, it tends to go down, but it could also radiate out, or it just sort of leaves. Because our body is not in a condition to hold it. So it just kind of flops out. And so from that sort of meditative place, spaciousness and calm, I think you're able to hear the birds chirping in the tree. That sense of nature is very healing. So maybe this sounds in your area, so just open, get out of ourselves and just open spaciously and become sort of more one with one's environment. We're not just ourselves, we're part of what surrounds us. So just sort of open and be. And hopefully you're in some place calm. And maybe you open the window and see if you could sense that energy outside. If it's not noisy, or even if it is. A meditative place can just be with sound. Like I told someone, I said, you practice at home. I said, but ultimately, the state of calmness I'm able to attain, I lived in New York City at the time, would be the same if I meditated in Times Square. All that noise wouldn't bother because you're able to just be with it. You don't have a resistance, so it flows through you, and it just is. And any resistance to calming is generated within us. But if we stick ourselves into neutral, we just flow with it. So why don't we just open and just flow and just hear without judging, without resistance, and let's just be. And if you become a little discursive, so my eyes are closed, so do this with your eyes closed. So we're mainly working with how our body feels and the speed of our minds, right? But what are we anchoring on? So we're partly anchoring our senses and our minds on how our body feels. But with our eyes closed, and we're not moving, and we're not being touched, and we're not touching something, our senses automatically go to our hearing. So we anchor with our environment, right? So our eyes are closed, so we can sense our environment, right? Sort of an ESP sense, sixth sense of that. And what we can feel against our skin. But mainly, it's through our ears. So we just hear the sounds, and that anchors us in our minds. Having an anchor promotes stability. And ultimately, we can anchor through our senses. And if we don't allow our minds to judge the sound, like that's a bird, there's 8 birds, they're happy, you know what I mean? That spins the mind. But if we're open and you just hear it, I hear happy birds. And that's it. Right? Because we have to ultimately identify it the first time. What are we listening? That's just the nature of our minds. But we leave it at that. We don't go into it and we don't keep labeling it. But we could say, oh, that's so pretty. And then we sit in that prettiness. You see? And that sound, we just listen. And that act of listening anchors our mind. But if you notice, if we just listen without judging, so you do what your space is. If you're able to hear the birds, then you could also anchor on that if you choose to. But after you've sort of done that initial identification and like, oh, that's pretty, right? Ultimately, it's best not to even judge. But, saying it's pretty actually heals us. It brings harmony to our bodies and to our energy and our mind. So reinforcing it by the desire of just saying, it's pretty, kind of lets go of that desire of wanting to affirmatively state that. And, sometimes that's just good. So there's a very rigid meditation instructors and sort of a more supple one. I'm more on the supple. And my teachers were more in the supple. So you listen and you open and you just be. So why don't we do that for a little bit, okay? Like, I don't know, 5-7 minutes. Of course, the birds stop chirping, so if you can't hear them, I can barely hear them myself. So open yourself to your environment. And even if it's quiet, once you settle your mind, you realize that even quiet has a sound. feel any tension in your body, just breathe, and with the exhale, you just release the tension. We're literally just letting go. Relax, relax, relax. Release, relax. Just be present. Just be open. Open. So now that we've settled a little bit, now is a very powerful time to say the name of God. So notice we didn't start that way, but we prepared our bodies and our minds to be open and spacious. And in that sort of open, pregnant space where things can arise and give birth in a sort of unimpeded way, in a way that is less blocked or constricted, this is a space where we can bring in the blessings of God and that connection. And then after we say the name a little bit, we can rest in that energy. And for those who aren't able to feel it yet, they could just be open and see how or if anything's changed in their body. And if there's a change, then that was the energy and vibration of God, that change of frequency. And you can sort of look to see how you feel different. And if you still don't feel anything, that's okay. Just rest assured you got the blessing, and with time, you'll be able to feel it. And we'll discuss more in the coming weeks and months techniques on how to make ourselves and our body more sensitive to what's called more subtle energies, which as we become more attuned are less and less subtle. So we're going to be open and spacious to get to that space. And then when you feel that spaciousness again after you stop listening to my voice, then say the name of God that you've been most inclined and connected to. And then you say it a couple times until you sort of feel that energy and you're in that energy, and then rest there for like a couple minutes. So we find your equilibrium. I'll leave like 1 minute for that, and then say the name a couple times, and then about 3 minutes after the 1 minute I will start speaking again. So you say the name a bit, you feel the energy, and then just rest and be in that energy and in your room, and you just open, rest your mind, and just allow that vibration to just do what it needs to do. And even if it goes away, you can still rest in that space. And if you feel called to, then say the name again and then rest. All right, so why don't we do this? When you say the names of God, it's very helpful to be in that posture with the fingertips together. It really aligns that energy as you say it, and it makes it very, very powerful and activated. Oh wow, yeah, well there we go. Okay. So sort of open the eyes, and sometimes I like taking the palms of my hands and just rubbing them slightly over the face and the eyes, and feel your legs and sort of kind of come back. Alrighty. This was nice for me. I'd been doing a lot of running around the last couple days. So connection to God, to spaciousness, to calm of the body and the mind is really the central core of what I teach. It's a path of experience or non-experience in a way sometimes, and a when experience. It's a little different in the English language than no experience, so maybe look it up, N-O-N, then what the word non means. It's actually N-O-N-E, I think. It's a path that gets you somewhere. It has a momentum and it leads to something, to a certain level of attainment, to a connection with God, to a greater religious or spiritual life and momentum and thoughts. It purifies our mitzvah, our karma. It engenders, it causes change in our lives. It's literally a path, and you walk a path. Or we drive our car on the religious, spiritual freeway. We're not parked on the side of the road of a religious or spiritual freeway, which leads us to things. And we're also not only on another freeway doing other things, and there's no spiritual, religious component to it. So it doesn't mean we're 100% fully dedicated. We would be a priest or a monk, right? But it's a part of our lives. And it's through techniques and practice, which is different than intellectualism of study of religion. Because if you don't walk it, it's not going to create any real changes. Because if you noticed, through my teachings, and I'm sure your own experience, we have to work with our body and our minds and our energies and our nerves, and how we're literally physically wired and psychologically wired, how our neurons are wired, and any blocks or issues we have. So, like you want to become a swimmer, you have to be in the pool. You can't just study swimming and be an expert. Well, the second you jump in the pool, you're going to have problems swimming because you never actually swam. And if you want to get somewhere and water is how you get there, well, you need to swim to get there, right? The intellectual knowledge is not going to replace the physical act of swimming to get somewhere. So praying, calming the mind like we did, learning how to still the mind, allows us to understand ourselves and our momentum better, and gives us better control because we've developed the muscle of being attentive, and sort of take our horse, that's the analogy I'm going to use. We sort of take control of our brain. So there's traditional analogies of our brain and how out of control our thoughts and our propensities, our habitual actions, or what we tend to do, sort of non-thinking. So we're learning to tame our minds. So the analogy would be our minds is a wild horse. Right? I don't know if anybody's ever broken in a horse. I sort of have. It's a wild ride, literally wild. You get thrown. I actually enjoy horses a lot. They're beautiful, noble animals. But when they're a little wild, they don't like you on the saddle, and they don't like being told what to do, and it's a new sensation. So you're literally learning how to tame the horse so it doesn't throw you off and listens to you, and you're able to ride the horse. And it's a technique, and it takes practice. But at some point, you become one with the horse. The horse and the rider become one. They work together, they have a relationship, and they dearly love each other. Horse loves the rider. The rider treats the horse well, right? And there's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. And of course, the person ends up loving horses for the rest of their lives, right? And that's sort of what we're doing. We're learning how to work with our minds, that we are riding our minds, not being ridden by our minds. So we're riding our minds are not riding us. We're directing the direction and the speed and what we're doing. We're in charge of our minds. Not that our minds are directing randomly, subconsciously, impulsively, neurotically, PTSD-like, or asleep. Whatever we are doing or going to do, and we're sort of in for the ride because we're not really consciously fully in control. It's because, I felt to do that. Or, well, if it's a wisdom feeling or based on some intellectual or guided, well, then you're sort of in control, and that's wise. But if it's just sort of, whatever, and here, I'm there, and whatever, and it's sort of, well, that's the impulses of the mind. We can go with it sometimes, but if our whole life is that way, that's not the way the mind's meant to be. It's supposed to be a tool. We're the rider on the horse of our minds. We're the driver behind the wheel of our car. Our car just doesn't drive itself and goes anywhere it wants. But then if we're not an attentive driver, we're sort of, the car, somehow our subconscious mind is driving the car, and we aren't as mindful as to which lane we're on, whether this looks like somebody who's high while driving, which I live in California. There are literally high drivers on the roads. It's crazy. But you're mindful of that, and you're aware, and you allow them to pass, or you move to a different lane, or you distance yourself from them, and you're engaged. You're not just asleep at the wheel. Most people are asleep at the wheel of their life. They never understood that their mind and who they are, their consciousness, are not the same thing. So I'm not fully going to get into that today, but I will touch base on that again. But it's also in, some of the archived teachings on YouTube. I think now there's over 50 of them. And you could see in the little description section, for most of them, except for the recent ones, they sort of have an in-depth topic list, and so you could see which ones. It's mainly the core teachings. So by doing the practice we did this morning, where the spaciousness and being open and learning to calm our minds really helps bring that wild horse a little bit under control. When it's called breaking a horse. It means you bring it under your control. It's not the nicest word, actually. See, people probably weren't mindful when they actually termed it. It's more taming a horse, right? And domesticating a horse. We're really just domesticating our minds. But you learn to go with the momentum at the beginning, and you're slowly reining it in, slowly bringing it in. And so by creating times and periods where you sort of in a spaciousness, you are giving space for that energy of the mind to sort of buck and do its movement, but you're not adding to it. You're on the saddle for the ride, knowing the horse needs to work out its agitation because you're on the saddle. And you let him do his thing as long as it doesn't get dangerous that you can get thrown or the horse throws you into a wall. But you allow the horse to do its thing, and with time, the horse calms down. And the horse ends up really liking to be ridden and looks forward to when you come to ride it. And that's sort of what we're doing. And when we have that space of calm, that pregnant space where the horse is calm, your mind is calm, then you say the name of God, and that blessing can go really deep because you've sort of cleared that energy. So when I said the name of God and I stopped, so today I felt to say it for a little while, like 50 seconds. Actually, I felt to do it for a whole many minutes, but I followed my own instruction, and then I stayed in the space, and my body, which I'd felt open and sort of empty of energy and present, because I'm able to get myself quite still, had become full. There was sort of felt lack of a better word, a thickness of an energy. There was a pregnant energy in me. The body felt very different, and it was warm, and it sort of was, how to describe it? Healing. And it was clear, but not clear. It was sort of like, a massage oil, sort of. But it wasn't oily. But I don't know if I'm kind of describing why. It's not very describable. And I sort of rested in that energy, and I literally felt it move around. and I have an injury on my body. And for the first time in a long time, many days, I felt it relax, and I felt the tendons actually relax, and the pain went away. Really can't make this stuff up. And I wasn't focused on that spot, but there was an injury, an energetic disturbance in my body, and the energy went there, and it just naturally healed it, and everything relaxed, and this part in my body really began to tingle. And right now it feels so much better. I actually feel relief. So when one starts having experiences, and I share these experiences so people who haven't had them can see and understand and get an experience of a knowing of what could be happening, you start realizing then there's really something there. And then you realize the power of saying a sacred name, and you get confidence, and you continue in a way. But it takes time, and it takes faith. And then once you do the spaciousness, and you realize how that helps you more focused in your life, and you're able to make better decisions, then you start realizing the importance, and then you make time, more dedication. You go deeper. So what I teach is experiential. It's a path you walk. And like any practice, any learning to swim, eventually you become an expert if you keep doing it. You become highly competent, and your techniques change, and you're able to do them in different places, in different situations that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. So the last couple weeks was a lot about knowledge. I did quite some teachings. I had notes. People who've been around for a while know I really don't do notes. Like today, there's not a single note written about anything. So that's knowledge, and it's important to understand what's happening. So I used the tree of life. I gave other teachings on the importance of repentance. I did research on what the traditional teachings were. I linked it to energy and how they're all linked and links to the path. That's important because you realize what's going on. And then you realize the importance to do these practices. It's not just because somebody said so, but you really see how they can engender change from a scientific, energetic, many masters over centuries, and it's a well thought out process. It's not just, this is something and it's cute and here you are, and there's really no history of it being helpful, right? So it's important to know that, because then you understand. And then when you do the practices and you feel things, you understand what's going on, and you're like, wow, oh my God, this is actually real. These teachings are true. I naturally have a very skeptical mind, which is great. Because when you do it, when you get confidence and you're less skeptical, and then you're no longer skeptical, you realize it's not because it's your inherent nature to just believe something. It really, really becomes a fact in your life because you really investigated it, and it becomes deeply rooted in you. So it's okay to say, I don't know about this. That's actually really good, because you're not going to fall in with half-baked teachings and con artists, or things that aren't good, which are masquerading as things are good, because you just don't jump in the water. You look at the water, you look at the instructor, you study a little bit, you listen, you use your brain. Yes, this makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. You put your toe in the water. This feels good. You look at the water. Yeah, it looks like there's no sharks. This is a pool. There's not going to be big waves. Yeah, I'm going to go in the, the shallow end, right? And then you say, okay, this works really well. And then you move more into the deep end. It's a gradual process, and it's smart. Or people like, I've done this for a while. I know this is good. I have full confidence, and off you jump in. And that's good too. But you do it with intelligence or you feel really instinctual, like this is really good, and off you go jumping, and you go right to swimming. And there are people like that. I've done that with teachers. I'm like, oh my God, this really works. And I trust my inner knowing. And that's good. So this sort of doubles back on something I've sort of said before in the past. When I teach about something, I use all my years of knowledge to make sure it lines up. I'm very careful. I do my research, and I make sure it's legit. And then I pray about it, I try it, and I'm like, yeah, this works. And if I'm uncertain, I take my time. But when one is beginning, it's hard to know what's legit. It's all new, and there are many roads, and you don't exactly they might all look kind of good, and they might be good for a while, and then they might not be good for a while, and you don't know exactly when. So I teach things. It doesn't mean you need to go and deepen that teaching more by going to those books or joining a group that's dedicated to that. You're not going to know exactly what you're going to get. It might be great, it might not. Some of these teachings have teachings that are kind of not so good, that look similar to the good ones, and you're not going to know until you're sort of further in. Teacher might have good intentions, but they're off, and they don't know that some of their teachings are really off. Or people have bad intentions, and things that are bad are masqueraded as good. So I tend to try to give teachings, like, for example, the teachings on the Tree of Life and things on Kabbalah or Eastern or whatever, that help according to the path of walking it to attain something. It's not necessary for you to go and become an expert in it, like Kundalini or whatever, or chakras, because I try to give enough to give an understanding and to give practices that help us move along. Getting all those details into your mind and becoming an expert makes you a book expert. Great. But a lot of it doesn't necessarily help you attain anything. It's learning the techniques or the knowledge that helps you down the path. But of course, there's just so many details, and some of it's fascinating. But the real true ones, the ones that are fully reliable, are sort of hard to find. There's a lot of books by a lot of well-intentioned or not so well-intentioned people, and they're not fully there. Like, I read a lot of books, and it's 60%, 50%, and somehow by the grace of God, I'm able to distinguish those things. It's just an innate ability I have. And I've studied really hard in school, so my mind's very sharp. And I have that innate sense. And I've also been very religious my whole life, so something sometimes just feels, But there's also things that I'm like, oh, I'll take this piece here and this piece there. So I really wanted to say that, because when I teach things from other things, I'm just afraid, because I used to do this. People would go grab books and deepen. So I want to put a yellow flag. Be careful. And remember, we want to attain something to get better, closer to God, heal, purify, become better people, all of the above, a couple of the above, right? So the pieces that are necessary to do that is not the whole enchilada of what certain topics are. So what I try to present are the essentials that help us. And so I'm trying to find a way to say this that doesn't sound self-serving. I really, really try to make it 100% true and correct. And I ask people afterwards if I'm in doubt, was this legit? Did I make a mistake? I think it's correct. I double check just to be safe, and I make corrections in my edits, or the next day, next week, I said, oh, I said this, I really meant to sort of say it this way, and I didn't like the implication of that. I don't say that too often, because by the grace of God, it tends to be spot on. But maybe I just suggest, having a little faith to just keep it here a little bit. And if you feel that you want to know more, trust that I will probably present more. It might be exactly what you're hoping to learn more in the future. But it's sort of like you need to grow and develop, and then you sort of get a little deeper or a little more when it makes more sense, when you've already had an experiential feeling for that. So I just wanted to say that. I've seen a lot of people led astray. I myself have gone down a few paths that I had to walk back from. So, or the teacher changed, or the teachings changed, and it went from being great to not so great. So I wanted to really flag that, because when I bring in other concepts and other things, they're fascinating, but be careful. And don't just spend your time in those books and getting up there, and you're not actually walking the road. Because then, other than intellectual fulfillment, whether the knowledge is good or bad, or off or correct or partial or complete, it's still in your mind. And that doesn't really create change, because it's really all about the energy. Intellectual knowledge is static unless you apply it. It's like having a database. You kind of have to hit the enter key and make it do something. And everything that HP Shalom is about doing something to get somewhere. So I wanted to step back and kind of say that, because it's really, really important. I want you all to stay healthy. I want you all to get better. And it's not that we're ill and not healthy, but anything short of perfection requires a healing. I require healings all the time. We're all on the path. We're all subjected to life and its stresses, and we're all subjected to the limitations we currently have. Right? I don't think anybody on this call, myself included, is a living saint and living in complete perfection and is a fully incarnated Emmanuel. So we're all growing and walking. So this morning was sort of a practice on how to create space, taming our minds, our energies, our momentums, and bringing in the blessing of a mantra, a blessing of the recitation of a name of God that has great blessing and power and puts an energy in our body that helps clear, align, bless, heal, and gives us wisdom. Wisdom can come from study. It's very true. When you listen to my teachings, that's a form of studying, a form of learning, right? But there's also a transcendent wisdom with a capital W that begins to come to you as the energy flows in a more purified and straight way, and one is more in the flow of blessings. And one does get into that river with time. It's literally a river of blessings, of energetic blessings in alignment, golden light. And then things come to you that are wise, but they don't come from your mind. They come from the upper, well, if we want to go Eastern, the upper chakras and the third eye and the crown chakra. The wisdom centers. And you also become more informed by your heart, your compassion. You see the world differently because your heart has been healed, heart chakra. All your energy centers become aligned, like we discussed a little bit with the Tree of Life, and I'll discuss more in the future. And that creates a wisdom that transcends knowledge, goes beyond the mind. And that's the path. And that's when things really get amazing and your life really feels extra human. We start going beyond what we think a normal, quote-unquote, normal existence is. And God knows this world desperately needs people to go beyond the normal, because if you go outside and see what the normal is, it's problematic, and that's why we have all these societal, ecological issues. We're not a society that's aligned because the individuals aren't aligned. And therefore, what we do is not aligned. And if we're off, then the consequences of being off manifest. Imbalances in us manifests in our families, in our spouses, in our children, because they react to it, and in turn we react to that, and in turn suddenly there's an atmosphere. Could be loving and harmonious, or passive aggressive, violent even, or destruction of relationships. And so it is with everything in our lives. So as we do these practices and walk the path, one realizes one begins to walk in greater harmony. One begins to see nature as one walks the street to one's work. One no longer has necessarily the tunnel vision and not even see the beautiful tree in front of their office, or is able to feel the green leaves or the fresh air. You can experience many things as you're going about your normal life that actually makes it special and healing and helps you have a better day. Because one begins to open up and you really begin to notice what was always there. You're single and you see that your best friend is always eyeing you, always is smiling even though they had the worst day, and always laughing with you. You never noticed he or she had a crush. And you've been lonely, but you never looked to who was right there. And then when you see that, you realize that you're in love with him or her as well. But because you had such a momentum and you never gave any indications, and the person was afraid to lose you if they showed their feelings, then you never went there. That potential never manifested. So when one opens, one really begins to see. S-E-E. Your sight expands because you're more there, more present, more aware. Alternatively, you see a friend that you trust and you get advice, and then you suddenly are able to see that their energy, which you've never really noticed before, really isn't that kosher around you. And there's always a sense of aggression, and then you're beginning to realize that advice was a little always off. Not only is the person off, therefore the advice is off, and you never really noticed, and you realize that they actually don't like you, and they're intentionally giving you bad advice because they're a really, really bad person. And they kind of want to F you up. And then you never saw it. And then you realize, oh my God, and you don't see or deal with that person ever again. And then you realize suddenly your life is doing better because you're trusting yourself, and you realize yourself actually had better advice than that person had. Do you see? We have tamed our minds, and therefore it's calmer. A person who is taming a horse does not see the trees around the fenced-in place where they're training the horse, where the horse is bucking. He is not smelling the air. He is not hearing the birds. He's not seeing any other horses around or any other person that's probably supervising in case he gets hurt, right? To call 911 because you can't get hurt taming a horse, because all of his intention is taken up by what he's doing. And most of our intention is really caught up in the momentum of everything. But once the horse is tamed and we relax, then he sees the arena he's in. Then he's able to go on a trail or in nature and look at the birds and look at the trees, because the horse is calm. Your mind is calm. You have confidence more. Your instincts tend to be better. You start to have awareness on what works, what's good, what's bad, from a more sane place of an objective perceiver that's perceiving his mind and perceiving his reality without a filter of habitual thoughts or momentum thoughts or PTSD thoughts or abuse thoughts, or just like you never really just noticed whatever happened in your life is just all there, because there is a consciousness behind the mind. Our soul, our spirit, there is a divine spark. When you see someone die, I've only seen one person die in my life, my father. Here's the thing many things surprised me. I thought the consciousness, his light, his person, would dim as he died. Now, the type of death he had means he didn't have something that would damage his brain, so it wouldn't fade from a physical point of view. So I was able to see that the spark of his life, even though he was in great pain for a while or heavily drugged up in the end, his spark, his life, was there until his body gave out and stopped. There wasn't a dimming of a candle. You know those candles with the oil? and it just turned down slowly, and then the flame got smaller and smaller and smaller and faded. It's like the light just went off. It left the body. That is the consciousness that I'm talking about. It's not our minds. Because he was very, very present. Because his mind was already, his presence was just so strong that he was really there. And that was there, and then it wasn't there. Because the vehicle, which included his mind, stopped. So that consciousness left. That's the piece that goes to heaven or hell. Does that make sense? So what we're learning, and all the Eastern and Kabbalah, is to bring that consciousness ever more into the driver's seat. And that consciousness, as one moves to God, is ever more powerful, has ever more abilities, and is ever purer and more compassionate and aligned and available to oneself, one's families, one's animals. And we're able to really see things and really engender positive change. When we clear our bodies, one's able to use your hands to put healing energy into yourself and other people. It's not bullshit, pardon my French. One begins to see possibilities. Like you say, oh, he's a great masseur. He had healing hands. Yeah, because the person's able to channel healing energy as he gives a massage. As one becomes clearer, one's able to understand one's body and the use of things. And with one's intent, really engender positive change. And that's the whole path. So all these teachings, including this one, look, it's very intellectual. But do you notice how it's intellectual and applied? So you don't need a million different teachings from a million different cultures. You need the ones that are clean, pure, that do a path. But ultimately, if you want to get from one city to the next, and there's a car path, you could swim the river, or you could run. Ultimately, you just need one of them. Right? And sometimes for certain parts of the path, it's better to have a car, and sometimes it's better to run, and sometimes you just maybe want to swim. But you don't need 1,000 of them. And it's better if they're all aligned in something similar, because if you notice, the car, the running, and the swimming are all very different skills. So the amount of time to dedicate to become proficient in each can be used in one to become an expert in that one. Master, what is it? Knower of all, master of none, or something like that, right? But you realize if you're a swimmer, you can use a boat on the water. So if you're just dealing with the water, right, you have a boat. Or if you're a swimmer, you could get on a surfboard and you can go faster. Paddling on top, not learning how to get on top. But then after a while, you suddenly are on top of the surfboard and you realize there's a tide and you could ride the tide faster. But it's almost a natural evolution, and you develop skills that are more inclined. So one sort of learns is in a certain group with a certain modality, and one becomes very good. So even though I present topics that are fascinating and very zesty, what I'm trying to say is resist the temptation of jumping full on into them. Enjoy the pieces, and maybe, look a little more if you're interested, but I really wouldn't go beyond just a little more evolution maybe, but not much more, because the focus needs on getting from A to Z, from Los Angeles to Paris or to London, or basically from here to heaven, right? And it's applying the techniques, doing the names of God, working directly with the energy, which is the quickest path of every single religious tradition I've studied. It's literally working with the anointing, and it's our efforts to heal ourselves, but also, like I've mentioned previous weeks, it's what comes from the other side, from the anointing of God that helps heal us. Working with both the two wings of a bird, right, really brings change. But ultimately, since we believe in a God, that is really a beyond blessing and grace. You can get so much further. You could struggle to get to St. Louis, or suddenly, by a prayer of God, the next morning you are in St. Louis. Not literally, but you could advance so much faster. What might take 3 years, you've done in a week, and you don't like, how did I do that? And you realize, oh my God, I prayed to God and asked, and somehow it just happened. That is the power of the names of God. So I've put certain things on my website that are things I've discussed, or it has the names of God for you to consider, to put on your altar if that inspires you, to put on the front of your phone, or if you wish to be more private, on the inner screen of your phone, to bless your device, and also to remind you to be able to connect with God during the day, get that blessing from that image, to help nourish and give you wisdom and to guide you throughout the day. To also bless your device, or to help you feel connected in a more secular world. Or you feel so connected, that's what you want as a screensaver on your laptop or on your phone. A wallpaper. And it might inspire you to go on the web and do some searches and find images that work for you. You know, a visual, if it's religious or sacred or linked to a teaching that you like the Tree of Life teaching, if that really resonates more than anything else, then that picture kindles a heart connection, which is linked to God. Or the names of God, because I put up a few medallions that have names of God on them, that helps a blessing through sight, because seeing these names blesses you. It resonates with your heart, that reaffirms your faith. These are blessings through sight. It could be blessings through hearing. I put links to the songs that are on my YouTube page that I liked, so you could be able to listen to them, or, there's ways to take a YouTube link and to be able to download it through other websites. And then you have it before you're in front of your shrine and you play it. You listen to sacred music and you just relax lying down on the floor and allow these sounds to bathe your body, and it's energy healing through sound. Music healing through sound. So it's forms of different blessings. And ultimately, we're working with our energy. If something resonates with our heart, that's a very healing vibration, and it releases, I think, endorphins, some hormones or several hormones in the brain, and is a natural antidepressant. If you feel threatened or there's a difficult period, you see that medallion inside your phone or whatever, and then you because you have faith, you know God's with you, and then you take that moment because you see it to just say a quick prayer. Well, that connects, that makes you feel calm and calls forth the blessing right there. And because you had that visual, that triggers your memory, to reconnect, that causes you to take those 3 seconds and reconnect. And if you do that a couple times a day, that really reroutes your car. It really puts it in a good, firm path. And that's a form of practice. Mini practices several times a day. You know, there's a technique in the Eastern of more modern teachers to, set a little reminder on your phone every hour or every 3 hours, just saying pray or think of God or say the name of God a couple times. And that literally shifts your energy through the day. It helps redirect your car, just subtly, or just to recollect, and brings you more present in that moment, and you kind of pop out of the momentum and gives you clarity, sort of a recollection of yourself, really. So I hope this is helpful. Knowledge is great, and I've given more knowledge in the last 5 or 6 weeks, from more bookish, right, more theological than I have. So I really wanted to just say, that's great, wonderful, and that's why I taught it, and so helpful, and I hope you apply it. That's what I mean. You apply it. Application, being in the car, gets you somewhere. So I just wanted at the end, I thought I would only speak for 15 minutes, but I've spoken a lot more. There's, a lot of new people. So I felt it was helpful to kind of go back a little bit as we're talking about working with energy, to touch in on some of the topics I've covered in the past, to really give a clear sense of direction on where I think people's valuable time and focus should be on. So if people need to go, that's great. But if people are able to stay, I really wanted to do a little practice together, because I've been needing it this week. It's all about our connection. It's all about the prayer. That's really where it's all about. So if people aren't already in front of their shrine, why don't we settle in there, and I'm going to move my computer to that place. Alrighty, so why don't you light your shrine, or if it's already lit, just put up a new stick of incense. I tend to use half a stick because the full one is just really too strong for my room, and it's too overwhelming. But just to take this moment to reestablish our connection. And what I did earlier was in my chair, facing my microphone and my laptop. So you could see we're able to pray and connect really in any place. It doesn't require to be in front of your altar or even at home necessarily. Offer up the incense. In my personal prayer space, there's objects in front and little jewelry and a beautiful colored light candle holder of sort of stained glass. And then I have one of the pictures that I offered on the website as the main picture, sort of behind the sort of glass thing which I place objects. And so I look at the names of God in front of me, and that's sort of the focal point of my prayer space. And that I picked a picture that feels good and brings me calm and sort of brings that blessing forward towards me. Because the blessing through sight, right? And as the sacred names of God, and has the Star of David, which for me represents my religion, which has all the teachings of God, for me, it engenders my faith and has a certain connection to Yahweh for me, right? Some people, it could be more Adonai or Hashem, right? So it has, and so it's the blessing through me visualizing that, and I see the sacred name, so there's a blessing back to me. And what it all means to me is a blessing almost kind of through my mind, as it sort of triggers that sense of faith which I feel in my heart. So that's everything, that's sort of the blessing of seeing something. Yes? And then the incense is a blessing through smell, because I use an incense that's very healing, that feels very holy. So the blessing through smell of the incense engenders a sense of holiness. And I only put up this incense in front of my prayer space. So as I associate this incense with holiness, and it's only through the prayer space that rekindles a sense in me that my prayer space is a holy place where God resides. So do you see how you create a situation that works with your mind and your thoughts and your feelings to reinforce a felt sense or notion within you? And since you feel it and it has that sense of holiness, then it receives that blessing and it actually becomes that. It's not always what you think is what it is, but for you and in certain situations, it actually becomes that. So by me feeling I'm in front of something holy, it actually becomes holy. Does that make sense? You judge it as holy, then for you it becomes holy, and therefore it is holy, especially if it's linked and connected with something which really is holy. You see what I'm saying? And this all works with energy. See, the blessing through sight, that we see it, right? So I guess the vibration of light that hits the eye, that's energy. Then the optic nerve is definitely energy, and it's processed to the mind, which is definitely energy, right? The smell goes into our nose, to the nerves in our nose, which is then translated into energy. correct? So, and then we feel it in our body, which changes the energetic frequencies and feelings in our body, which influences our mind, which changes our thoughts and our emotions. And given we've created this sacred environment, it creates a blessing and holiness and leads to religious and spiritual change and attainment. So what we're doing is really an energetic recycling to something that's better and pure. But we can't do it just by listening to me sharing what's going on. You actually have to realize it, make it come about by actually doing it yourself and having that experience and change for yourself. It requires that active component of participating in the techniques, because something needs to change within us energetically. A realignment, a reconnection, and receiving the blessings and graces of God. And that requires an engagement. Yes? So together, because I love praying with you all, why don't we pray a little bit, right? So we're going to do the Shema prayer, and there's a link to it on the YouTube and on the website. And then why don't we spend some time working with the name of God, and you could work with the name you wish to work with. And today I'm going to work with Yahweh, the name of the God of the Old Testament. And since this is a prayer space, I feel very comfortable saying that name, but in certain traditions, that name's not used to be more Adonai or Hashem, but or you could use Emmanuel, or if there's another tradition and there's a holy name, you could feel free to use that. If it's sort of linked to the God of the Old Testament, because we're trying to keep it to that. But so we're going to just work with that powerful energy of the name, and you can recite it for as long as you feel to, and then take a rest, and then if you feel called to, recite it some more. So we're going to focus a little more on the recitation, the repetition of the name, and a little less space. But if it feels overpowering, then you take a break. If it feels like, oh, this is a bit much, you can take a break, make a pause for however long you need to, then do it again. So you really judge how much and for how long, but we're doing this time a little less space and a little more working with the blessing of the recitation of the name. If you say it out loud, it blesses your hearing because you hear it. So you get a blessing through sound, a blessing through the vibration through your throat, a blessing through the movement of your body as you create the sound. These are all real forms of blessing, mind you. And it clears and blesses your space and blesses the shrine, the objects that are there, and blesses the paper of the picture that you have. And I feel, empowers the image as well. From a physical point of view of you towards it, but be mindful the image of what it is, and because it has an image of a sacred object in of itself, it's sacred. So a Torah is sacred in and of itself. It gives off a blessing. It really doesn't need our blessing, because it's the sacred word of God, and that's why putting sacred text itself, it gives off a blessing. So if you ever have a picture that becomes damaged or you don't want to use it, you just don't throw it in the trash. Ideally, you burn it. But at the very least, I would shred it mindfully and respectfully, or you bury it in the ground, because the image itself is sacred, because it's has a sacred object to it. And by doing that, you show respect to God, because God's image is, or spirituality or word is reflected in it. And that creates a vibration in us and reaffirms that God that resides in us, and makes those energies that are in us become more dominant and flow better. And then those blessings flow more through our body. So really the path is to really tap into the blessings and to live in the blessings. And that really helps us to really have a wonderful, sacred, and meaningful life. And enjoy better, life better. And there we are. So let's take a moment in center. And now I will play the Shema, affirming our faith. And then we'll, you can recite the name for a while, and we're just going to do this, 7-8 minutes, and close. And then I'll play that Anna Kabak prayer at the end, that Kabbalist prayer which I mentioned last week, and you could just allow it to flow and be in that beauty of it. It's so beautiful. I love the rendition, and the prayer itself is very sacred. So, and you could lie down as it's playing and just let it wash over your body. And then, after I sign off, you can go back or go on the website and play it several times and just allow the beautiful music to flow. And be in that spirituality, or find songs that speak to you, that make you think of God, songs that have anointing or speak of faith. And that helps us, swim along. Okay.
Shema תרצה רוח, קבל רינת עמך סגבנו, תרנו נורא. אנא בכוח גדולת ימינך, תרצה רוח, קבל רינת עמך סגבנו, תרנו נורא. אנא בכוח גדולת ימינך, תרצה רוח, קבל רינת עמך סגבנו, תרנו נורא. נא גיבור דורשי ייחודך, כבבת שומרם, ברכם תרם, רחמי צדקתך, תמיד גומלם, חסין קדוש, חסין קדוש, ברוב טובך נהל עדתך, יחיד גאה לעמך פנה, זוכרי קדושתך, שבתנו קבל ושמע צעקתנו, יודע תעלומות. אנא בכוח גדולת ימינך, תרצה רוח, קבל רינת עמך סגבנו, תרנו נורא. שבתנו קבל ושמע צעקתנו, יודע תעלומות, יודע
ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד.
May Yahweh bless us, bless our week, bless our lives, and bless our prayers and practice in our world. So thank you so much for joining me for another week. I just wanted to say the word non does not have an E. Sometimes I get a little tripped up when I'm in the middle of saying a teaching. So it's N-O-N. So just wanted to make that clarification. And thank you for joining me. This was really wonderful, and I look forward to being with you all next week. Bye-bye.